I came home 3 weeks early expecting silence inside my mansion. Instead, an HOA Karen claimed it was her house, called the cops on me, and had no idea the homeowner had just walked through the front gate. Welcome back, everyone. Before today's story begins, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll always know when a new story is released. Your support means more than you know. Every like, comment, and subscription helps this channel grow and allows us to keep sharing incredible stories with viewers around the world. And before we begin, tell me this, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Now, grab a comfortable seat, relax, and let's dive into today's unforgettable story. I've learned that the most dangerous lies are the ones told with complete confidence. By the time I pulled through the wrought iron gates of my own estate, someone else had already convinced an entire neighborhood that I didn't belong there. The tires of my black Range Rover rolled slowly over the familiar cobblestone driveway, each crunch echoing through the quiet morning like a heartbeat I hadn't heard in months. The mansion stood exactly as I remembered it, sunlight spilling across the limestone walls my parents had commissioned nearly 20 years earlier. Fresh roses climbed the trellises beside the entrance. The fountain in the circular drive still sent water dancing into the air with that soft rhythmic splash I'd fallen asleep listening to as a teenager. Everything looked perfect, until the front door flew open. A blonde woman I'd never seen before stormed onto my porch wearing an expensive white sweater and oversized sunglasses, clutching a coffee mug with one hand and her phone with the other. Her expression wasn't confused. It was furious. "Stop right there," she shouted before I'd even switched off the engine. I frowned, assuming I'd somehow pulled into the wrong property after 3 exhausting weeks overseas. Then I looked up. The bronze family crest mounted above the entrance caught the morning light. No, this was my house. I stepped out, stretching muscles stiff from a 14-hour flight. The scent of jet fuel still lingered on my jacket, while cool autumn air carried the smell of freshly cut grass across the estate. Somewhere nearby, sprinklers clicked methodically through another watering cycle. Everything felt wonderfully familiar except the stranger marching toward me, as though she owned every brick beneath her feet. "You need to leave," she snapped. "You're trespassing." For a moment I honestly thought she was joking. "My name is Nathan Calloway," I replied calmly. "I live here." She laughed. Not nervous laughter. The smug kind people use when they're absolutely convinced they're smarter than everyone else. "No, you don't," she said, folding her arms. "I've lived here for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The number hung in the air longer than it should have. I looked past her shoulder. My grandfather's antique grandfather clock was still visible through the foyer windows. The marble staircase I'd slid down as a reckless 12-year-old still curved toward the second floor. Even the bronze eagle sculpture I'd inherited from my father remained exactly where I'd left it. Yet somehow this stranger spoke with complete certainty. "You've got exactly 30 seconds, she announced, lifting her phone. "I'm calling the police." I didn't argue. I simply reached into my pocket and pressed the familiar button on my key fob. Across the driveway, my garage doors began gliding upward with their quiet electric hum. Inside sat my Aston Martin, my vintage Porsche, and the motorcycle I'd restored with my father before he passed away. The woman's smile disappeared for barely half a second. Then it came back even sharper. "You hacked the system," she declared. I almost admired the creativity. She stabbed 3 numbers into her phone. 911. "Yes. There's a man breaking into my home. He's trying to steal my vehicles. Please send officers immediately." Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens drifted across the neighborhood. Curtains moved. Front doors opened. Neighbors gathered along immaculate sidewalks, whispering as patrol cars turned onto the private road leading toward my mansion. 6 police vehicles surrounded my circular driveway before I'd taken another step. As officers climbed out, the woman pointed directly at me with theatrical confidence. "That's him," she yelled. "Arrest him before he gets inside my house." I looked at the mansion where I'd been born, where every photograph on every wall carried my family's history, and realized something far more disturbing than a simple misunderstanding had happened while I was gone. The oldest officer in the group stepped toward me with the deliberate pace of someone who had spent decades separating truth from theater. His silver nameplate read Lieutenant Harris, and the lines around his eyes suggested he'd seen every neighborhood dispute imaginable. Still, even he looked uncertain as he glanced from me to the woman standing triumphantly on my front porch. "Sir," he said politely, "I'm going to need you to step away from the residence while we sort this out." I nodded without protest. "I understand." Deborah Hensley folded her arms, the corners of her mouth lifting just enough to let everyone know she believed she'd already won. "See," she announced loudly enough for half the neighborhood to hear. I told you he wasn't supposed to be here. The crowd along the sidewalks grew larger by the minute. Perfectly dressed retirees, dog walkers, joggers who had conveniently paused their morning exercise, all whispering while pretending not to stare. Their faces carried the same expression people wear when they expect free entertainment before breakfast. The irony almost made me smile. I had grown up watching 4th of July fireworks from this exact driveway. My mother hosted charity galas beneath the crystal chandelier inside that foyer. Every Christmas, my father insisted on hanging lights himself, refusing to hire decorators because he said traditions mattered more than convenience. Every inch of this property carried memories that couldn't be purchased or fabricated. Yet here I was, standing 20 feet from my own front door while strangers debated whether I belonged. Lieutenant Harris asked for identification. I handed him my driver's license. His eyes dropped to the address, then slowly lifted toward the mansion. This says you live here. Because I do. Before he could respond, Deborah stepped forward. He forged that. She interrupted immediately. Professional scammers do this all the time. They steal identities, make fake licenses, and target expensive homes. Her confidence was almost impressive. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed her myself. I've been living here for 3 weeks, she continued. The HOA approved temporary occupancy after this place sat abandoned. Abandoned. That word hit harder than I expected. The house hadn't been abandoned for a single day. 3 months earlier, I'd accepted an unexpected investment opportunity in Singapore involving the acquisition of 2 historic luxury hotels. The negotiations were supposed to last 6 weeks. They stretched into 3 months. Even then, the mansion never sat unattended. I employed a licensed property management company that handled maintenance, security inspections, landscaping, utilities, and weekly walkthroughs whenever I traveled. Every invoice arrived electronically. Every exterior camera uploaded directly to encrypted cloud storage. Every smart lock recorded activity to the second. My schedule changed. Ownership never did. While Lieutenant Harris examined my identification, another officer wandered toward the garage, studying the collection of vehicles visible through the open doors. Beautiful cars, he muttered. They're registered to me. I answered. Deborah laughed again. He probably looked up the VIN numbers online. Several neighbors chuckled with her. Interesting. Not one of them asked how a supposed criminal had managed to unlock the front gates, open the garage remotely, or drive directly through multiple security checkpoints without triggering a single alarm. People often believe the loudest voice in the room, especially when it sounds certain. Lieutenant Harris returned my license. Mr. Calloway, he said carefully. She's provided documents showing authorization to occupy the property while the owner was unavailable. There it was. The first crack in the foundation. Someone had produced paperwork. Real paperwork. Not just neighborhood gossip. I looked beyond the officers toward the second-floor balcony where my father's American flag still hung exactly where I'd left it before departing overseas. The breeze caught the fabric gently, making it ripple against the morning sky. Something inside that house had been manipulated far beyond simple trespassing. Someone had spent weeks building a story convincing enough that even experienced police officers were beginning to question the man whose family name had been engraved on the property's original deed for nearly 4 decades. And if forged paperwork existed, this was no longer about an entitled HOA president pretending to own my mansion. This had become something far more deliberate. There's a moment in every con game when the lie becomes so polished that even honest people stop questioning it. Standing in my own driveway, I realized Deborah hadn't simply broken into my mansion. She had been performing a role every single day until everyone accepted her version of reality. Lieutenant Harris asked her to produce the paperwork. She didn't hesitate. That alone caught my attention. Most people fumbling through a lie waste time searching their purse or inventing excuses. Deborah reached into a leather portfolio tucked beneath her arm and handed over a neatly organized stack of documents as if she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. There, she said confidently. Temporary occupancy authorization. HOA emergency maintenance approval. Community preservation agreement. The papers looked official from a distance. County-style formatting. Raised seals. Professional typography. Even the signatures appeared authentic. Several officers leaned closer. One of them quietly whistled. Looks legitimate. Deborah glanced at me with a smile that practically glowed with satisfaction. I told you, she said. He thought he could intimidate me because I'm a woman living alone. A few neighbors nodded sympathetically. That sentence changed the atmosphere immediately. No longer was I simply a man claiming ownership. Now I was becoming the aggressor in their eyes. Funny how quickly perception shifts when someone tells the better story. Lieutenant Harris looked back toward me. Do you have anything showing ownership besides your driver's license? I do. Is it inside the house? Most of it is. Deborah laughed before I could finish. Exactly. He's trying to get inside. Several officers instinctively moved closer. Professional. Calm. Not hostile. But definitely cautious. I kept my hands where everyone could see them. There was no benefit in matching Deborah's energy. She wanted emotion. Emotion creates mistakes. Silence creates questions. The breeze carried the faint scent of chlorine from the backyard infinity pool. Somewhere behind the house, wind chimes my mother had imported from Vermont sang softly against one another. I hadn't heard that sound in months, yet it instantly transported me back to summer evenings spent grilling steaks with my father while my mother read novels beneath the covered terrace. Deborah interrupted the memory. I've invested thousands into this property already. That made me blink. Thousands. She continued speaking before anyone could interrupt. When the HOA found this estate neglected, we stepped in to preserve neighborhood standards. I've supervised cleaning crews, landscaping, interior decorating, and security upgrades. Interior decorating. Security upgrades. She said those words as though improving someone else's property somehow transferred ownership. One of the neighbors raised her voice. She's been hosting HOA meetings there every Saturday. Another added, we thought the previous owner sold it. I saw moving trucks, someone else chimed in. The furniture looked different. The pieces began falling into place. 3 weeks. 3 weekly meetings. Visible activity. Confident explanations. No one had verified anything because Deborah had spoken with enough authority to erase everyone's doubts. That wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. I studied the second-floor windows. The curtains were different. My mother had chosen deep navy linen imported from Italy. Now pale beige drapes hung neatly behind the glass. Flower arrangements I didn't recognize sat beside the front entrance. The brass lanterns flanking the doorway had been replaced with black modern fixtures. Small details. Expensive details. Someone had treated my mansion less like a stolen house and more like a personal renovation project. Lieutenant Harris noticed me staring. Something wrong. They've changed the exterior. He followed my gaze. You noticed that from here? I picked every finish on this house with my parents. For the first time since arriving, his expression shifted. Not toward belief. Toward curiosity. You designed it? My family built it. Before he could ask another question, Deborah stepped between us with practiced confidence. Officer, this is exactly what professional fraudsters do. They research luxury properties online. Floor plans, photographs, ownership history. She pointed toward the fountain. He probably memorized every detail before showing up. It was a clever explanation. Almost too clever. Because while everyone listened to Deborah defending her version of events, I noticed something she never expected me to see. Mounted beneath the porch roof, just above the main entrance, one of my original security cameras was gone. Not broken. Not damaged. Removed. And someone who intended to steal a house doesn't usually start by removing the witnesses. The first person who loses control in a situation like this usually loses everything that follows. Deborah clearly expected me to argue, to raise my voice, maybe even to shove past the officers toward my front door. Instead, I did something that confused everyone watching. I stood perfectly still. The silence lasted long enough for the fountain behind us to become the loudest sound in the driveway. Water splashed against polished stone while a light breeze rustled the oak trees lining the property. Somewhere above us, a mockingbird landed on the roof ridge, completely indifferent to the small war unfolding below. Lieutenant Harris broke the silence. Mr. Calloway, if you're claiming these documents are fraudulent, we'll need evidence. You'll have it, I answered. Deborah smirked. No, he won't. She walked confidently toward the front entrance, slipped a polished brass key into the lock, and pushed the massive walnut door open. There, she announced. My home. The gesture was calculated. Not for the police. For the audience. The neighbors immediately relaxed. People trust what they can see. A woman unlocking a front door appears far more convincing than a man calmly insisting it's his house. Deborah disappeared inside for less than a minute before returning with framed photographs tucked beneath one arm. She spread them across the hood of a patrol car. Family dinners. HOA meetings. Holiday decorations. Every picture showed her smiling inside my mansion. Some displayed floral centerpieces sitting on my mother's dining table. Others showed neighborhood board members gathered around the fireplace my father had built from Tennessee fieldstone. One image even captured Deborah standing beneath the crystal chandelier in the grand foyer, raising a champagne glass while guests applauded. The neighbors nodded again. I was there, one man said. So was I, another added. The photographs weren't fake. That was what made them dangerous. They documented something real, just not something legal. Lieutenant Harris looked through the images carefully. They've been inside for weeks. Exactly, Deborah replied. We've been maintaining the property. I took one slow breath. The smell drifting from the open doorway immediately caught my attention. Vanilla. Artificial vanilla. Not the cedar and leather scent that always greeted me when I walked through those doors. Someone had replaced the fragrance diffusers, a meaningless detail to everyone else, an unmistakable one to me. Then another change registered. The antique grandfather clock in the foyer had been rotated nearly 90 degrees. My father would never have allowed that. He believed it should always face the staircase because his own father had positioned it that way decades earlier. People who inherit houses preserve habits. People who occupy houses rearrange furniture. Deborah mistook my quiet observation for surrender. "You understand now?" she asked sweetly. "You picked the wrong address." I looked directly at her. "No." Her smile faded slightly. "You picked the wrong house." Before she could answer, another officer approached Lieutenant Harris carrying a clipboard. "Sir." He lowered his voice, though not enough to keep me from hearing. "I ran a preliminary check, and the county tax records still list Nathan Calloway." Deborah answered before Harris could. "Those databases aren't updated yet. The HOA has temporary authority while ownership is under review." It sounded rehearsed. Too smooth. Too immediate. As though she'd anticipated that exact question. Lieutenant Harris frowned for the first time. "Ownership under review? By whom?" "The association." He looked at her. "The HOA reviews county ownership?" A tiny pause. Barely noticeable, but it was there. "Well, our legal committee coordinates with the county." Not quite an answer. The lieutenant didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced back toward me. I reached into my jacket pocket. Deborah instantly stiffened. Two officers placed their hands near their holsters. Slowly, I pulled out my phone. Nothing more. "I'd like to make 3 calls, I said calmly. Deborah laughed again, though this time it sounded forced. "Calling your lawyer won't help." "I'm not calling my lawyer." "Then who?" I unlocked the screen without taking my eyes off her. "The people who built this house to remember exactly what it looked like before you moved in." For the first time since I'd arrived that morning, the confidence disappeared from Deborah's face. Only for a second. But sometimes 1 second is enough to expose the first crack in a lie that's been carefully constructed for 3 weeks. I've negotiated multi-million-dollar acquisitions across 3 continents, and one lesson has never failed me. The person who talks the most usually knows the least. So while Deborah kept performing for the crowd, I quietly began ending the performance. I scrolled through my contacts and made the first call. "Ethan." My property manager answered on the second ring. "Nathan, you're back already." "I am. Tell me one thing. Who authorized anyone to occupy my house?" Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that makes your stomach tighten before bad news arrives. "What do you mean, occupy?" I looked toward Deborah. She was laughing with 2 board members who had just arrived in matching polo shirts embroidered with the HOA logo. They looked more like campaign volunteers celebrating an election than people involved in a property dispute. "There are people living inside." "What?" His voice cracked. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. I ended the call. The second call went to my security consultant, Victor. "I need complete cloud archives for every camera connected to Calloway Estate." "Already pulling them," he replied. "What's going on?" "I'll explain later. You'll have every backup." Click. The third call was the shortest. "County Recorder's Office." A receptionist answered. "I need Deputy Recorder Melissa Grant at Calloway Estate immediately. It's regarding an active ownership dispute." There was a pause. "I'll notify her." That was it. 3 calls. No speeches. No threats. No dramatic accusations. Just 3 people who dealt with facts for a living. Deborah watched me slip my phone back into my pocket. "Done pretending?" she asked with a grin. "I'm just getting started." She rolled her eyes. "I've dealt with rich men like you before." "I doubt that. You think money makes you untouchable. It doesn't." "What then?" "The truth." She laughed so loudly several neighbors joined in. Truth wasn't entertaining. Confidence was. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the limestone facade until the pale stone almost glowed. I could smell fresh mulch from the flower beds someone had recently spread beneath the hedges. Even the landscaping had been altered. My mother preferred white hydrangeas along the front walk. Now they had been replaced with bright red begonias. Small changes. Every one of them another fingerprint left by an unwanted guest. Lieutenant Harris walked beside me. "I appreciate how calm you've remained. I've learned panic doesn't improve evidence." He nodded slowly. "You seem awfully certain." "I know exactly where I slept on my 10th birthday." He looked at the mansion. Same bedroom. Same window. "What color were the walls?" "Forest green. My father painted them himself because I wanted to pretend I lived in a treehouse." A faint smile crossed his face before disappearing again. "You remember a lot. You don't forget home." Across the driveway, Deborah noticed us talking. She marched over immediately. "Officer, he's manipulating you." "No one's manipulating anyone," Harris replied evenly. "He keeps making emotional claims." I answered before the lieutenant could continue. "Because homes are emotional." She folded her arms. This isn't your home. I looked directly into her eyes. Then tell me what's carved beneath the third stair. Her smile froze. What? The third stair leading into the foyer. She blinked. I don't know what you're talking about. My father carved my initials there after I chipped the wood with a toy fire truck. The neighbors exchanged uncertain glances. Deborah recovered quickly. Old owners leave marks all the time. Correct. And you've lived here for 3 weeks. So, if this were really your home, you'd already know every scratch. For the first time, nobody laughed. The wind carried the distant rumble of approaching engines from beyond the subdivision entrance. One SUV, then another. I recognized both immediately. Ethan never drove slowly, and Melissa Grant from the recorder's office never traveled without county files. Deborah heard the vehicles too. She turned toward the road, then back toward me. The confidence she'd worn all morning hadn't disappeared, but it no longer fit as comfortably as it had 10 minutes earlier. Because deep down, she had finally realized something dangerous. I hadn't called people to defend my story. I had called the people who could prove hers was impossible. The funny thing about evidence is that it never gets nervous. People do. Lies do. But facts simply arrive, one after another, until there's nowhere left for fiction to hide. The first SUV rolled through the open gates, gravel crunching beneath its tires before stopping beside the patrol cars. Ethan Mercer climbed out so quickly he barely remembered to close the driver's door. He still wore the navy blazer embroidered with the logo of Mercer Estate Management, and his face had gone completely pale before he even reached me. Nathan. He looked from me to Deborah, then toward the front porch. What happened? I answered with one sentence. Apparently, I've been evicted from my own house. His eyes widened. What? Lieutenant Harris stepped forward. You manage this property? I've managed Calloway Estate for almost 6 years. Did you authorize this woman to occupy it? Ethan stared at Deborah as though she'd asked him whether the moon belonged to the HOA. Absolutely not. Deborah immediately pointed toward her portfolio. We have emergency authorization. You have nothing from us, Ethan replied. His voice wasn't angry. It was confused. The kind of confusion professionals experience when reality refuses to match paperwork. Before anyone spoke again, the second SUV entered the circular drive. A county seal decorated both front doors. Deputy Recorder Melissa Grant stepped out carrying 2 thick document binders and a slim aluminum case. Unlike everyone else present, she didn't glance toward Deborah first. She walked directly to Lieutenant Harris. You requested county ownership verification. I did. Melissa opened the aluminum case on the hood of a patrol vehicle. Inside sat a rugged county-issued laptop and portable document scanner. Within seconds, she logged into the county property archive. Everyone watched the screen. No one spoke. The only sounds came from chirping birds and a steady splash of the fountain behind us. Melissa typed the parcel number from memory. Then she rotated the screen toward Harris. Current owner. Nathan Calloway. Recorded. 38 years. Any transfers? None. Leases? None recorded. Temporary occupancy? Melissa frowned. No such filing exists. Deborah stepped forward so abruptly one of the officers instinctively blocked her path. That's impossible. Melissa looked up. No, ma'am. She pointed calmly at the screen. This database updates in real time. Deborah's confidence cracked. Our HOA legal committee has no authority to modify county ownership records. The sentence landed like a hammer. Several neighbors looked at one another uneasily. Someone quietly whispered, "What?" Melissa wasn't finished. She scanned the paperwork Deborah had proudly presented earlier. The machine beeped twice, then displayed a red warning banner. County seal invalid. She scanned another. Again, invalid. The third, invalid. Lieutenant Harris folded his arms. What does that mean? Melissa answered without emotion. The embossed seals were reproduced. Copied. Manufactured. She slid the papers into separate evidence sleeves. These are not county-issued documents. The air seemed to leave the entire driveway at once. Even the neighbors stopped whispering. Ethan opened another folder. I brought every maintenance report. He handed Harris a stack of inspection logs complete with dates, contractor invoices, utility records, and photographs taken every Friday during routine walkthroughs. The first image appeared on the tablet. My foyer. Exactly as I'd left it. Timestamped 24 days earlier. The second. Empty kitchen. Third. Living room. No furniture belonging to Deborah. Fourth. Bedroom hallway. Normal. Then the fifth photograph. Taken only 19 days before my arrival. The security camera above the porch was clearly visible. I looked at the empty mounting bracket outside. Zoom in, I said quietly. Melissa enlarged the image. The camera remained attached. Then Ethan opened another report dated 1 week later. The camera was gone. No maintenance request. No replacement authorization. No repair invoice. Just missing. Lieutenant Harris slowly turned toward Deborah. You told us you've been preserving this property. She swallowed. We upgraded the security. Ethan shook his head immediately. No contractor entered this property with our approval. The lieutenant looked back at the empty bracket above the porch. For the first time all morning, he wasn't looking at me as a possible trespasser. He was looking at the house itself, and every piece of evidence seemed to be pointing toward one unavoidable conclusion. Someone hadn't simply occupied my mansion. Someone had systematically removed the very witnesses that could have exposed them from the beginning. Once a lie starts collapsing, it rarely falls all at once. It breaks apart piece by piece until even the person telling it can no longer remember which version is supposed to be true. Lieutenant Harris held Deborah's documents in one hand and the county records in the other. He compared them quietly, his expression growing more serious with every passing second. Around us, the neighborhood had fallen into an uneasy silence. Even the people who had defended Deborah minutes earlier now watched without saying a word. Ms. Hensley, Harris said evenly, I need you to explain something. She forced another smile. Of course. You claim the HOA granted temporary occupancy. That's correct. And you stated the county was reviewing ownership. Yes. Melissa Grant shook her head before Harris could continue. There is no ownership review. Deborah turned toward her. Maybe your records haven't updated. Melissa closed the laptop with a calm click. Our records are the legal record. The sentence landed harder than any accusation. One of the HOA board members standing near Deborah quietly took a step backward. Then another. Interesting. Confidence is contagious. So is fear. Harris looked at Ethan. When was the last authorized inspection? 5 days before Mr. Calloway returned. Did your staff report anyone living here? No. Any authorization for renovations? None. What about replacing security equipment? Ethan immediately produced another folder. Every approved contractor signs in electronically. He flipped through the pages. No camera replacement. No lighting replacement. No interior redesign. No occupancy approval. Every answer tightened the circle around Deborah. She tried again. We only made cosmetic improvements. I looked toward the porch. My mother's lanterns. Everyone followed my gaze. They're gone. Deborah shrugged. They were outdated. My permission wasn't. Nobody laughed. The wind carried the scent of fresh paint drifting from somewhere inside the mansion. I suddenly remembered something else. The library. Harris looked at me. What about it? The west wall. Ethan frowned. Oh, he understood immediately. The hidden climate panel. Only my family and the original restoration contractor knew it existed. It controlled humidity for my father's collection of rare first edition books. Without the system running correctly, the wood paneling would begin drying within weeks. I looked toward Deborah. What temperature did you keep the library? Her eyes narrowed. I don't know. Humidity level? Silence. The emergency ventilation override? Nothing. Ethan quietly muttered. She doesn't even know there's a panel. Melissa glanced at Harris. That isn't something someone living there for weeks would overlook. The lieutenant nodded slowly. Deborah sensed the shift. You people are twisting everything. No, Harris replied. We're verifying everything. Another patrol officer approached carrying a cardboard storage bin. Lieutenant, what did you find? The security camera. Everyone turned. The officer lifted a weatherproof surveillance unit sealed inside an evidence bag. It was behind landscaping bushes near the detached garage. I felt my jaw tighten. Someone hadn't simply removed it. Someone had hidden it. Victor, my security consultant, called my phone before I could speak. I answered on speaker. Nathan, I recovered the cloud synchronization logs. You did? Yes. The porch camera stopped transmitting 19 days ago. Failure? No. Victor paused. It was disconnected manually. Every eye shifted toward Deborah. Victor continued. Before it went offline, it uploaded one final encrypted backup. I stared toward the mansion. Can you recover it? I already have. My pulse slowed instead of quickening, because I knew exactly how those cameras worked. They never deleted recordings immediately. Every event remained archived off-site. Deborah didn't know that. She thought removing the camera erased the witness. Instead, she'd simply delayed its testimony. Lieutenant Harris lowered his notebook. Mr. Calloway. Yes. I think we're past determining who owns this house. He looked toward the evidence bag containing the hidden camera. I think we're now determining who tried to make everyone believe you didn't. For the first time that morning, Deborah looked less like the confident president of an HOA and more like someone desperately searching for an exit that no longer existed. People imagine justice arrives with shouting, flashing lights, and dramatic speeches. In my experience, justice usually begins with someone pressing the play button. Victor's voice came through my phone again. The archive is restored. Lieutenant Harris looked at me. Can we view it? I was hoping you'd ask. Victor emailed the encrypted file directly to Melissa's county laptop. She opened it without a word, rotated the screen toward the officers, and increased the brightness. The crowd instinctively leaned closer. Even Deborah couldn't stop herself from looking. The recording began 19 days earlier. The timestamp glowed in the upper corner. 6:42 a.m. The porch camera showed my empty front driveway exactly as Ethan's inspection photographs had documented it. Morning sunlight stretched across the stone steps. The fountain hummed peacefully in the background. Then a moving truck appeared. It stopped directly in front of my house. Several workers climbed out carrying furniture. A white SUV pulled in behind them. Deborah stepped into view wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying the same leather portfolio she'd been holding all morning. She wasn't inspecting anything. She was giving orders. She pointed toward the front entrance. The movers carried boxes inside. Another camera angle activated automatically from the garage. There she was again, unlocking the service entrance with bolt cutters. Not a key. Bolt cutters. Several officers exchanged quick glances. The third angle appeared. The hallway camera. Deborah walked through my foyer directing movers while speaking into her phone. Although there was no audio, her gestures told the story clearly enough. Take that painting down. Move that table. Replace those chairs. She wasn't preserving the house. She was redesigning it. Melissa advanced another few minutes. The library appeared. Two workers removed my father's framed military photographs from the wall and stacked them against a corner. Another carried away my mother's antique reading chair. I felt something tighten in my chest. Those weren't expensive objects. They were irreplaceable memories. The recording continued. At exactly 11:17 a.m., Deborah climbed onto a ladder beneath the front porch. She unplugged the exterior security camera, looked directly into its lens, then removed it. No panic. No hesitation. Someone comfortable believing nobody would ever question her. Lieutenant Harris quietly exhaled. So that's where the camera went. Victor spoke again through the phone. The cloud recorded every connected device. Melissa clicked another file. The smart lock activity log appeared. Every front door unlock. Every garage access. Every code entry. For years, one name appeared repeatedly. Nathan Calloway. Ethan Mercer. Authorized maintenance staff. Then suddenly, 19 days ago, unknown manual override. No authorized credential. No registered access code. Someone had physically bypassed the locking system. Ethan rubbed his forehead. That requires dismantling the exterior panel. It does, I answered. Deborah folded her arms tighter. This proves nothing. Nobody answered her. Melissa opened one final document. Insurance notifications. A required automated report generated whenever structural security equipment was disconnected. Recipient, Nathan Calloway. Status, undelivered. Reason, primary contact temporarily overseas. Secondary recipient, Mercer Estate Management. Ethan stared at the screen. We never received this. Victor answered immediately. Because the forwarding email was changed. Melissa looked up. By whom? Victor paused. The system logs show someone used the homeowner's office computer inside the mansion. Silence settled across the driveway. Not the silence of uncertainty. The silence that follows certainty. Deborah slowly realized every digital system inside the house had become a witness against her. The cameras, the locks, the maintenance reports, the county records, the cloud backups, even the insurance software. Each one independently described the same sequence of events. No dramatic conspiracy, just timestamps. Lieutenant Harris carefully removed his notebook from his pocket. His tone remained calm. Professional. Ms. Hensley. She swallowed. I need you to place your hands where I can see them. Her confident smile disappeared completely. Around us, the neighbors who had applauded her HOA meetings only days earlier began quietly stepping away, creating space as though they suddenly feared being associated with her. Funny how quickly crowds reorganize once truth becomes impossible to ignore. I looked at the mansion standing peacefully behind everyone. It had never spoken. It didn't have to. Every system inside it had already told the entire story. Handcuffs don't make much noise until they're closing around the wrists of someone who believed they would never wear them. I heard the soft metallic click behind me, and when I turned, Deborah Hensley was no longer standing like the queen of the neighborhood. She stood with her shoulders slumped, staring at the stone driveway, as Officer Collins calmly secured her hands behind her back. I didn't steal anything, she insisted, though her voice had lost every trace of authority. Lieutenant Harris remained professional. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. She tried one last time. The HOA approved everything. Harris looked toward the shrinking group of board members. Then they'll have an opportunity to explain their involvement as well. Those words scattered them faster than a thunderstorm. The two men who had proudly stood beside Deborah only minutes earlier quietly slipped toward their vehicles. Another board member removed his embroidered HOA jacket before climbing into his SUV. One woman hurried across the street without looking back. It amazed me how quickly people abandoned power once accountability arrived. Melissa carefully packed the forged documents into evidence bags while another officer photographed every room Deborah had altered. Ethan walked beside me as we finally approached the front entrance together. The heavy walnut door felt familiar beneath my hand. For a moment, I simply rested my palm against the carved wood. Home. Not because the deed said so. Because every scratch, every hinge, every stone carried a memory no forged document could ever replace. The house smelled different when I stepped inside. Artificial vanilla still lingered in the foyer, mixing awkwardly with polished marble and fresh paint. My mother's favorite oil painting leaned against the hallway wall, waiting to be rehung. My father's reading chair sat awkwardly beside the dining room, completely out of place. The crystal chandeliers still shimmered overhead, but someone had replaced the warm bulbs with cold white LEDs that made the entire room feel like a hotel lobby instead of a family home. Ethan sighed quietly. "We'll put everything back." I nodded. One room at a time. We walked into the library. The hidden climate panel remained untouched behind the oak molding. I pressed the concealed latch exactly where my father had shown me years earlier. The panel slid open with its familiar mechanical click. Green indicator lights blinked patiently, waiting for someone who actually knew they existed. I smiled for the first time that morning. Outside, tow trucks arrived to remove Deborah's SUV along with the moving truck that still contained several unopened boxes from my house. Detectives continued documenting evidence, while county investigators interviewed neighbors who suddenly remembered details they had overlooked before. Funny how memories become clearer once people realize they're speaking under oath. Several weeks later, the investigation concluded. The forged paperwork led to additional fraud inquiries involving HOA records, unauthorized assessments, and financial irregularities unrelated to my property. The association elected an entirely new board, and the county required independent oversight before it could resume normal operations. My mansion was never the only problem. It had simply been the first one impossible to ignore. As for me, I spent the next month restoring something far more valuable than furniture. I restored routine. The navy curtains returned to the windows. The brass lanterns went back beside the front door. White hydrangeas replaced the red begonias. The grandfather clock faced the staircase again. Even the porch camera found its original place beneath the roofline, quietly watching over the driveway where this entire nightmare had begun. One evening, I sat alone on the terrace listening to the fountain splash beneath a fading sunset. The cool breeze carried the scent of cedar instead of artificial perfume, and the wind chimes my mother loved sang softly above the garden. For the first time since returning home, the mansion sounded exactly as I remembered. People often ask whether revenge feels satisfying. The truth is simpler than that. I never wanted revenge. I wanted my home back. And I learned something my father understood long before I did. Authority can be borrowed. Confidence can be faked. Paperwork can be forged. But real ownership leaves fingerprints that time, technology, and truth always remember. Justice isn't loud. It's patient. And sooner or later, it always opens the right front door.